Anything worthwhile to be gained in life requires effort. Happiness that we seek in freedom requires effort. For that purpose, the Buddha taught for nearly 50 years to show us how that can be accomplished. But the effort has to be there. The guidance is here. The guidance, the teachings, the instructions are here, available. Thankfully, fortunately for us. The other very important ingredient is our time and effort, if we want to spend it wisely. And there's nothing higher and more valuable than true freedom. And that's what the Buddha taught. Freedom from our suffering. We can relate with someone else's suffering, with their misfortune. We can be compassionate, sympathetic, empathetic. We can strive to ease the suffering and pain of others. But not at the cost of giving up our own release from suffering. It can never cover for it. It can never replace it. We have many distractions in life, the root causes of which we do not spend the time and effort to understand. And this is the danger of the Dhamma in trying to study the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, by reading snippets of it here, there, listening to this, that talk, practicing some form of meditation, albeit from this tradition. Okay, you might even be practicing sila, precepts, virtue. Okay, that's wonderful, but is there right view? Without right view, we're lost. Even lost in the so-called Dhamma that we profess, claim to be practicing or living according to. So ultimately, it falls upon our own shoulders to understand the root of all things. Hence, the choice in the sutta, which today happens to be the third week, where we're covering this marvelous sutta, deep sutta, from the middle-length discourses, Mūlapariyāya Sutta, Majjhima Nikāya. Excuse me. The first, as I said in the past, it's the code, the algorithm itself of the rest of the suttas, the discourses to be followed, the 152 suttas throughout this collection of discourses of the Buddha, the middle-length discourses, which we call. Here we find the source code, to use computer language, lingo. Here we find the password. Here we find the formulaic, well, the equations of how to proceed and how to really look at the discourses to follow, many of which we've already covered. But this is a sutta that is often misunderstood, misrepresented, and not paid any attention to, sadly. And our effort here is to change that. And so let's continue today Mūlapariyāya Sutta, oftentimes it's translated as the root of all things. However, I've been using the late Venerable Jnanananda's, Katukurunde Jnanananda's version of the way he approached, which I'm in total agreement with, in his rendition of the title, which is the root pattern of behavior of all mind objects. Root pattern of all, the root pattern of behavior. It's not belief, it's behavior. Trust the behavior, not one's words. This is very difficult for us to really lock on and try to live our lives with this credo, with this approach in looking at behavior, including our own, and not what we like to believe or say to ourselves and end up believing and lead others to believe as well. Because ultimately, it's all mind objects that we're dealing with. Mind objects. In the teachings, they're usually referred to as dhammas, not as capital D, as we write it in English, but small d, which designate objects, phenomena, mind objects specifically, that are to be cognized by the mind. So narrow it down to the most basic elements. That's what we got. Mind that knows mind objects, period, nothing else. Ultimately, but how will we know this? We have to take the roundabout way. We have to really take the long way to really understand. Otherwise, it can be just another dogma for us to blindly follow, and that's not what the Dhamma is. Never been. People try to make it so. So, from the moment we open our eyes, we're dealing with the sustaining perpetuation of illusion into our waking states, all the way to the moment we close our eyes and we go back to sleep. And that is, we're looking at ways to pack in experience in a form where the Buddha calls it ghana. Ghana means compact. We give ourselves the illusion that things are compact. Ghana sanya. They exist. They have this solidity to them. That's what we give this. That's what we, every moment we put that signature of illusion onto it. But this is real. This is my experience. This is mine. This is happening to me. Meanwhile, there is no such thing. Of course, the Buddha addressed it in many different ways. One of them being one of the three characteristics, right? The last one, anatta, the non-substantiality of things, of beings, the corelessness, where something doesn't even have a core. The image that the Buddha gives is the metaphor that he uses often is the plantain tree or the banana tree. If you've ever seen a banana tree and you peel it, or you take a machete or a knife and you cut it, you're not going to find a core in it. There's nothing there. It's just layers upon layers upon layers upon layers until you end up the other side of this so-called tree. And it's gone. There's nothing. It was just layers. All you look around, it was just a pile of things. There was nothing compact. It had the illusion of being compact, however. That's essentially what we're dealing with. But it simplifies things, right? It solidifies things. So we don't see the layered quality, the causally being built up and precariously maintained, by the way, precariously maintained by us, by looking away, by not being attentive to what is really happening. So it's constantly in a state of flux, isn't it? The illusion that we maintain, we sustain every single moment to moment to moment existence. Meanwhile, it's never the same. It's never reliable, right? Because it's always changing. Yet we love to hold on to it. It could be our image of ourselves, memories, emotions, feelings. In essence, reality. That is reality for us. And anyone that gives us a certain feeling, they themselves have now for us a role to play in that reality. Meanwhile, it's all in a state of flux, inconstant, layers upon layers of nothingness. When you look deep, how many of us are willing to do that? So this sutta is helping us to see, to give us the courage, in a sense, to encourage us to go beyond the images we see, the forms we observe and we take as real, the sounds we hear that we take as real, the smells that we sense we take as real, the tastes, the flavors we experience and we take as real, the sensory perception of the skin through tactile perceptions we take as real. Real, absolutely 100% real. And the most devastating of all, the ideas, the concepts, perceptions that we take as real, which this sutta is all about. That's why it is attacking our approach to looking at this thing called reality, which is anything but. In the sutta, where we see Lord Buddha listing 24 principles, 24 concepts that were prevalent, that were discussed, that people relied on in one way or another. You had yogis who were practicing, let's say, who had developed the practice to such a point where they were able to experience the formless jhānas. Lord Buddha is even attacking that because they took it as real. Ultimately, something to hold on to, attach oneself to. There's a sense of belonging, an identification, a solidity that we give to. Same thing with other things such as Devas or divine beings, gods. And there's different, obviously, layers of gods that people over centuries, thousands of years have developed. Of course, Lord Buddha is even addressing those. And at the very nuts and bolts of things, he's even looking at the 4 great elements, or dhatus, or constituent parts of existence in a sense, namely earth, water, fire, and air. Again, these are not just those elemental, as they're called, the way a nuclear physicist might look at the atomic structure of, okay, elements. No, this is not that. There's elements of it, but no. When Lord Buddha is talking about earth element, yes, of course, he's including in that the earth, rocks, trees, things that have solidity to the touch, to the experience, but also anything that has the quality of hardness. It could be your attitude, which has also the element of solidity, which is earth. Fluidity would be the water element, right? Fire would be even something like being involved in a heated argument. There's the element of fire. Even your digestion is part of, demonstrates the part of quality of the fire element, etc., etc. So we have thus far talked about 2 of the categories of beings the Buddha is addressing, namely the Putujjana and the Seka. Putujjana is the regular person who's unwise, to say the least, does not care about the Dhamma, does not care about the noble ones, living the good life in a sense, seeks out maximization of pleasures, minimization of pain, just the average person. You might be very well versed in the Dhamma too, by the way, and still be a Putujjana, very much so. Pursuing popularity, pursuing fame, pursuing wealth, gain of acquisitions, wealth, etc. Putujjana. The one I call the dense person, dense, thick-headed. Nothing penetrates. There's so much conceit there. Arrogance. Then you have the second person, which we discussed last week extensively, the Seka, which is, or who is the noble disciple in higher training. This is a person who has already seen the Dhamma, meaning at the lowest level, the most basic level, that's what I mean by lowest, they have to be a Sotapanna, stream winner. And then you go up to once returner, and then you have the non-returner. Those are the Sekas. So we address those. This week we're talking about the Arahant. And if all goes well today, we finish this section. Next week we'll be going over the section of the Tathagata. That will be where we will end this sutta. But let's, play it by ear. So the theme that the Buddha, if you notice what the Putujjana is saying, where Lord Buddha was pointing out, highlighting the Putujjana's problem, main problem is that he thinks by imagining. Manyana is the term, imagining. Sometimes in Old English it was called me thinking. Conceptualizing constantly. An advanced version of that in Buddhist literature would be papanchas, mental proliferations, constantly formulating newer imaginings which are based on identifications. This has everything to do with conceptualizing, because we are very much at one with the thing that we imagined or are imagining, or things that were imagined. And we carry that. Well, that becomes our identification. That becomes our perception. That's why a person is unwilling to ask the question, am I the same person as I was when I was 10? When now they're in their 30s. Yesterday someone asked me, what does a Buddhist think about the goals and ideas that we had, aspirations, objectives in life when we were kids? And I said, which could you be more specific? Because the objectives will change from the moment that you're perceiving them, because it's all piling up. There's nothing fixed. So even with age, which age are you talking about? When you were 11 or when you were 11 and a half? Or 11 and 1 day old? The person had to scratch his head, because we like to put ourselves in a thick box, metallic, something very, nothing can absorb it, nothing porous, nothing that's changing. These are all concepts that have nothing to do with reality, because things are changing. They're in a flux. So it's an illusion, of course. But unfortunately, one that is dictating our very being, our very existence, our very perpetuation in, what I was saying earlier, suffering. Because when we put our image of what we think is happening, or could be happening, or was happening out there in the world, when we project, in other words, when we're imagining something, that brings about a sense of identification, because now that thing over there, in space over there, is attached to me. In fact, it is a creation from me. It is an extension of me. There's an invisible line, an umbilical cord between me and that thing I'm imagining, which means you touch that thing over there, You shake that thing over there, and you are shaking me. You are jolting me. You are agitating me. Why? Because the imagination, the identification with that concept, with that thing. That's why people get offended. People get hurt. Even if you don't touch them on their skin, people get up in arms. They are doing it right now because of ideas. Why? Because they have taken on, their imagination has been running loose. And when you have that, you're also very susceptible. You're also very vulnerable at the hands of those who know how to manipulate concepts, what you believe, what you think. And that's why you're easily shaken, you're easily moved, you're easily agitated. And that's why this sutta is very difficult for many people to swallow, to gulp down. Because we don't understand and we don't appreciate the danger in identification. Because it's the thing which keeps us in illusion, in suffering, and therefore in the cycles of repeated existences, what we call samsara. So there's nothing noble in identifying, including the very last of the 24 concepts that Lord Buddha talks about, which is Nibbāna itself. Because even Nibbāna, the Buddha says, can be taken as an object, can be seen as something solid to adhere to grab onto, to reach out to hold on to. So it's that identification that we are trying to release ourselves from. So that is another way of looking at the title of the sutta as well. So coming back to the practical aspects or pragmatic aspects of the sutta now, as to why the division. As I mentioned, this is about the third person, and the Mūlapariyāya addresses 4 categories of persons or people: the Putujjana, as I mentioned, the Seka, the noble disciple in higher training, the Arahant, which is today's topic, and the Tathagata, the Buddha. That will come next week. So here we're talking about the Arahant, which the Buddha, or whom the Buddha highlights and is addressing out of the other 2 that we mentioned last week. So to the surprise of many people, this has also been a cause for people to be confused, by the way, with this sutta, because the Buddha talks about 4 different Arahants. Now, on the surface, you might think, oh, are there different types of Arahants? Well, no. Nibbāna is Nibbāna. There aren't different gradations of Arahants, An Arahant is an Arahant is an Arahant. The Buddha himself is an Arahant. Okay? But there's a category of Arahant which you can consider. And simply because we're saying this, because the Buddha himself is the one who distinguishes the 4 from each other in this case. But the sutta itself does not offer that much detail, but from the rest of the vast body of suttas and discourses, we can make the conclusion as to why. So you have one that is, you can call it the generic Arahant, where, well, first of all, the defilements that are often referred to as poisons, kilesas, in the heart, namely, lobha, dosa, moha. All right? Lobha is the greed, the lust, the passion, the desire, the deep desire that one has. The dosa is the hatred or anger, aversion. And thirdly, you have delusion, moha. So these are the 3 defilements in the heart of a person. So the generic Arahant, meaning the one who had to address all these 3 on almost an equal level, by battling them, combating them, where none of these 3 really stood out as intensely difficult for them to overcome. So they were pretty much on the equal footing to each other, if we can say that. Once the Arahant is able to penetrate with wisdom and see the kileshas, see the sankharas for what they really are, and makes that leap, makes that breakthrough, they become Arahants. That is the first category of Arahant you can think of in this sutta as described. Now, as I said, none of the kileshas was really standing out. However, if you look at your life and you know that you have some issues with yourself, some certain habits, proclivities that are very difficult than others to deal with in yourself to overcome. It could be greed, it could be anger, it could be to expand that into different anusayas, underlying tendencies such as jealousy, for example. So similarly, the Buddha here is making the distinction between the Arahants who have become Arahants by their exceptional quality in digging deep into one more than the other kilesas, more than the other two defilements. So he distinguishes between the Arahant who has attained thanks to the effort that he placed specially in the area of raga, or the lust, or the greed, the passions, which he had to deal with. We need to consider the fact that we have incalculable eons of lifetimes that we have lived, in which we have experienced a lot. We have kept ourselves in delusions and stupid habitual patterns of behavior. They're not going equally, the kileshas. Some will stand out more. Sometimes, at least in the life where the person is bound to become an Arahant, if they work hard, they might be dealing with certain anusayas, certain defilements that bring up more of the aggression, which we see a lot these days, right? People are angry. People are so much passionately angry and full of hatred. That would be the other Arahant, because he has to, or she has to, overcome that through understanding. So they need to spend extra time and energy focusing in on, why am I getting so angry at this? It might come in a different form. It might be something so lofty. I want justice in the world, and I can't seem to get it. So what do? I am full of rage, anger, hatred towards that. But these are just superficial. Remember, features and characteristics of things, those are the major stumbling blocks. They're very attractive. What is really happening underneath it all? The defilement is being perpetuated. It's simmering still. The Arahant is a person who's seen through it and breaks through it. So you have these three categories. I mentioned the greed, I'm mentioning the hatred now, and then there's the delusion, one that keeps forgetting, one that does not maintain insightful approach towards understanding his own life, her own life. Ignores the Dhamma, ignores the teachings, tries to do their own thing, despite the fact that they have been proven to be erroneous, full of suffering. They still go by there and do it again. And that is a typical expression of moha, delusion. So this third, or fourth rather, type of Arahant is the one who demolishes, destroys, decapitates delusion, because that was the one that was really the hardest, because he or she was able to overcome the other two. So there is a distinction so long as we're discussing the defilements and their own intensity, their gradient intensity. But as far as Arahantship is concerned, or Arahantut, they're all the same. Okay? Of course, scholars went crazy with this sutta because they have a field day, as they say, with nitpicking through things, coming up with things that are not even, they're totally baseless and have no basis in the suttas. So whatever we're discussing here is from the suttas. So the distinction here is that we're going to see um, is the third person, is the Arahant, and that will be the one that we will go over with these 24. Now the approach is going to be different, as you notice, because the first one, Lord Buddha was simply stating the facts about the Putujjana. He says, when the Putujjana looks at the world, sees a form, he's or she's completely pulled into it, identifies with it, takes it as real, and that's the end of the story. And because of that, they suffer. And last week we saw the Seka, that a noble disciple in higher training, a noble person basically, they, who are still a student, by the way, they're still training. And Lord Buddha, if you remember, was saying to that person, she should not be pulled into the features and signs, the nimittas of what is being observed. They should not imagine that there is a thing that's solid, that's real. Don't do that, he was saying, right? Mamanyi. Don't imagine. It was instruction given directly to the Seka. Now, let's see how the Buddha approaches the Arahant. Because he's not going to say, oh, Arahant, don't imagine. Or the Arahant goes ahead and then solidifies objects and imagines things to be there when they're not. No, he's going to be approaching it differently. So the first category of Arahant is, I translate it as the Arahant who has fully understood. Here, the Bhikkhu who is an Arahant has already destroyed the heart's contaminants, the asavas. He has truly and finally done what had to be done by completing his task, and thus has fulfilled the goal of the holy life. In doing this, he has put down the heavy burden and thereby eradicated the very shackles of renewed becomings, and is an Arahant who has released himself through direct and complete understanding, and thus attained full awakening. There's no more awakening for the Arahant. They're done. They're done. Later on, sadly, in the other traditions that popped up over the centuries, like in the Mahayana and Vajrayana, they kept on picking on the Arahants and they demoted them to validate their own scriptures that they kept on coming up with. So it's no surprise to find Venerable Sariputta or any of the other Arahants as being almost like Putujjanas are seen in the in the suttas here. In the Mahayana suttas, you don't have the Arahants really be Arahants because they have somehow lost their awakening in their own interpretations, sadly, which is complete corruption of the Dhamma. That's why I call it that. It has no Dhamma at all. Here and there you have to nitpick, but the teaching is already full in the Pali Nikayas that we see here, because the Arahants are Arahants. There's no more work for them to do. So the Buddha starts with the first, and that is Patavi, as we saw. By the way, I'm going to try to skip these concepts because they're the same 24. However, the approach of the Arahant, of course, as I mentioned, will be different than the other two we've talked about before, previously. But I will try to jump through these. And once we finish next week's as well, then we will have the whole entire PDF uploaded, because this one is not yet uploaded onto the website. So anyhow, that was a side note. Earth, Patavi. For this reason, when looking at earth and all that has the solidity or material quality of the earth element, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends earth as earth. Fully knows and directly comprehends earth as earth. Did you notice? He didn't say he does not. He perceives it as mine. He didn't say that. He knows it fully. Fully. The images help. That's why I also share those similes with you. Like I gave you the example of the plantain or the banana tree or the onion. There is no core. But of course, there is an onion, there's a banana tree. I mean, it gives bananas, right? Hopefully. But when you penetrate it, there's nothing. These are images that can stay with you, that can allow you to deepen your understanding of knowing, comprehending earth as earth. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagine earth to be earth, through and through, and nothing else. He does not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to earth. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from earth. He does not imagine earth as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider it as mine, for he neither delights in nor because of earth. And why is this the case? It is because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, and therefore he directly comprehends. This I declare. Direct comprehension is what will allow us to break free from suffering. It's not a conceptual, it's not an abstraction thing. This vimutti, or liberation, it has to do with the effort and time, as I was mentioning, that we put in the right teaching, in the right way, with right view, so that we too can release ourselves from our own imaginings, our own identifications, where things don't touch us anymore. Remember the image that you project, you put it out there, the concept you have. Anything that happens to that concept, I'm going to feel agitated by, moved by. Tremors will happen within me. Why? Because me and the concept are the same. That's called identification. How does it begin? How does it happen? Distinction between experiences. That's what consciousness is trying to do, right? Trying to discriminate between this and that, specifically when it comes to feelings. Feelings. I like this enjoyable, pleasurable feeling. I don't care for that painful, unpleasant feeling over there. You see the discrimination? And definitely, I'm not interested in anything neutral, right? If it's neutral, it's like, I almost have that position of a politician who deals with somebody who gives, who's unwilling to throw in a ballot, to elect someone. They're undecided. They don't care. They're not voting, in fact. Politicians don't like that. So neutrality, which is the biggest part of our experiences, neutral feelings, in fact, are the most recurrent, the most prevalent types of experiences. So we even discriminate between that as well. It's almost on the same level as a painful feeling in many cases, because we like to go to the juicy, sweet, honey tasting pleasure, pleasant feeling. This is, therefore, we're talking about preferences, identification. So it's synonymous. We like to look at what is beautiful versus the ugly. That's what the consciousness is really trying to do. The consciousness is not doing it on its own because there's ignorance, because we're not observant as to what's happening. That's why we need sati and sampajanya, mindfulness and full alertness, to see this. Otherwise, it's impossible for us to see the root behavior of all mind objects, the title of this sutta. It's impossible for us to see things the way they are if we're not here present to see them with clear sight, nothing blocking our view. But before we claim that we see the root of all things, we need to understand, is there any attachment, any vested interest? That's another way of looking at discrimination. Am I preferring this type of feeling over those? The Buddha was warning the Seka, remember? Last week? So today we're seeing the Arahant who's gone beyond that, because he looks at water, earth element, fire element, air element, but he doesn't look for anything solid there, anything that's real there. Because he's gone beyond some type of facilitation of trying to make them into an identifiable thingness for him to grab on and consider as an asset, an acquisition, something to hold on to. Remember the first week I was mentioning it, how we give object status to things, experiences, memories, even age, right? When I was 16 years old, this is what happened, or that happened, or this is what's happening to me. That person over there is a dirty person, is an evil person, is causing so much terrible things to happen to people. Well, one way to identify that, this is another way of looking at the object that I just imagined, I just created. It might be giving me enough evidence outside, okay, fine. That person does exist over there, right? But as far as my experience goes, the identification is what we're after. Because now I've identified myself with that person over there. I am here, they're over there. I'm the good person who's not liking that. He or she is the evil person over there. And every time I see that person, something happens in me. Do you see now the umbilical cord I was referring to? That person does something, or something is mentioned about that, and I feel agitated. The Arahant doesn't have that, because they've cut that cord. How? Anicca, dukkha, anatta. They have seen that there have been many, many people like that. Throughout history, they will always come. They will always go, though, as well. Ultimately. And it's painful to see this, but it changes. Impermanence is happening all the time. So automatically what that creates is within you a sense of revulsion, what we call disenchantment oftentimes. Nibbāna, that is key. Without Nibbāna, without revulsion, without some level of disenchantment, there's no Nibbāna ever going to happen. Revulsion or disenchantment is a must. So anybody who wants to stay passionate about something is far away from ever attaining Nibbāna. Even if you have been told that you're, oh, noble disciple, you're Sotapanna, you're Anagami, ooh, nope. If there is passion, which means there's identification, then you're a long way from it. Why? Because there's no disenchantment. So that is number one. So when you are seeing that, oh, this has always been the case. There has always been people like that. There's always been injustice. There's always been poverty. So your tight grip around that, taking it solid, taking it as a real thing that is life-shatteringly real, that I have to do something about now, meaning the agitation, suddenly loosens up because of the presence of revulsion, because of your getting the same thing with the pleasurable thing, by the way. Why am I getting so excited about seeing this? Going to this museum and seeing this work of art again, or eating this delicious food that I've always considered to be delicious. Okay, at the end, what happens to this delicious food? What happens after I've eaten it? I lose interest. Oh, that losing of interest is another way of understanding disenchantment. So in other words, we are trying to register mere awareness of what is happening between these three feelings, three types of feelings. We're seeing the big picture. The Arahant sees the big picture. That's another way of understanding, full comprehension. They see the full picture. They don't need anyone else's summary of it. Next, we have apo, or water. Similarly, when looking at water, he sees it through his, I'm jumping now because, as I said, it's a repeat. He sees it through his higher knowledge and therefore does not objectify nor imagine water to be water. distinctly apart from water, he does not consider it as mind, for he neither delights in nor because of water. And why is that the case? It is because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, and therefore he directly comprehends. Thus, this I declare. So even while experiencing something, he remains detached. This is what the Buddha was saying to Bahya Daruchirya, which you've heard me mention many, many times. In fact, it was, I think, the second sutta of these series that today, I think it's 157th week. It's such an important, concise, deeply powerful sutta, where the Buddha gives the shortest instruction, and in the briefest time, we have Bahya attained arahantship. Because the Buddha gave, because he saw who and what level he was at, Bahya. He said, Bahya, when training, as you see things, there's just a seeing. So you're not in it, you're not of it, you're not on top of it, you're not aside from it, you're just seeing. End of story. When hearing, you're just hearing. So you're fully there. You're seeing it, but you do not carry over anything. No features do you dwell on and replay in your head, because you're detached from it. So the Arahant is experiencing detachment, aloofness, in all kinds of sensations that he or she is experiencing. They are not dead. They are not automatons. They are not, like I can't even say a vegetable, because vegetables feel too. Even robots are said to be feeling. They're showing some sensory perception, some people say. Imagine the Arahant then. There's a difference between attachment and detachment, yet still being percipient. Why? Because the Arahant is free from imagining. Manyana doesn't exist. Remember, that's the key word. Manyati is in Pali, to imagine. Why is it so bad? Because it agitates us. Because you cannot imagine without putting something of yourself in it. And that putting something of yourself into something means identification. And when you're identified, what follows is agitation. You are hanging by a thread from that thing, and how that thing is being perceived, talked about, encountered. And because it's so precariously maintained, life itself is so precariously maintained. If you stop your breathing, if somebody comes and closes your mouth and nostrils, and despite all your struggles, they maintain that, we will die. If there's not enough oxygen, we will die. If there's not enough gravity, we will die. Perfect example is a plant. Remove the plant from the soil, the roots from the soil, and put it on a hard surface. It will die. We're not so different, So it's very precarious. But we so often rely on our identifications, which are the sum total of our imaginings, basically, to give us some sustenance, some meaning that we do exist. And Nibbāna is the opposite of that. Nibbāna is the extinction of that identification. Nibbāna means extinction of that desire to be detached, to be separate. Extinction of craving, extinction of the desires, the longing to hold on to assets. That's what Nibbāna is. And because of that, it is freedom from suffering. Because there's no more identification. So, because the Arahant has understood fully, therefore, what that means is he does no longer imagine. Now remember, it's not that he becomes an Arahant and then suddenly he wakes up and he no longer imagines. No, 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 no. It's not a status you attain. It's like a job, all of a sudden, a position you are given. And now, because of that superior position that you hold, your income has gone up. Your outfit has to change. People have to salute you differently. You're now the president or the king of a country. No. Your income is different. No. Arahant is not like that. First you attain and then these things happen. No, 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 no. The very non-imagining, the non-identification with things already is the path to Nibbāna. That's what facilitates the Nibbāna to occur for the Arahant to be. And once they are Arahant, already they've done it, the work. They're not going to wake up, oh yeah, I should not be imagining today. Oh, I should not, I'm an Arahant, I have to be non-identifying with things. It doesn't work like that either. So he or she remains untouched. They are free, literally. Untouched. And totally unconnected with psychological suffering. Next, we have Tejo, or fire. So while looking at fire, he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge and therefore does not objectify nor imagine fire to be fire through and through. So he sees fire, but he doesn't objectify. He doesn't turn it into, oh, there's fire over there. Remember, he or she is living on this planet, so they are totally cognizant of, conventional reality. If you remember, when we, which was that? Chula Tanha Sakaya Sutta, where we had Venerable Mahamoggalana go to Sakka's Tawatingsa heaven because he wanted to check to see if Sakka, who had just left the Buddha's presence because he asked him a question, and the Buddha gave him an instruction, he said, when nothing is fit to be entered into, clung to, nothing is worth to be attached to. So Moggallana, Venerable Mahamoggalana, saw in his mind, in his heart, that Sakka might not have gotten the message or taken it to heart, really, the meaning of the Dhamma given to him. So he goes and follows him in Tawatingsa heaven. And he sees Sakka having a blast, the king of the gods, right? King of the 33 gods. And he, not only does he dismiss the question of Venerable Mahamoggalana, he says, oh, Bhante, come and see my palace that I've built in my honor. It's a huge palace, incredibly, glorious, this, that. So finally, Venerable Mahamoggalana wants to teach him a lesson because Sakka has forgotten the Dhamma. He was attached to the elements. He was seeing the palace as the palace, the walls as the walls, and nothing else. But to teach him a lesson, Venerable Mahamoggalana touches the palace wall with his big toe. One toe, by the way, just one. And the whole thing, they have, I don't know, an earthquake the size of 12 on the Richter scale, which is unheard of on the planet Earth. The whole thing shakes. The Devas, all the ladies in waiting over there in his hundreds and hundreds of rooms, they freak out. The gods freak out, including Sakka. His complexion changes, the king of the gods himself. Why? Because he was identified with this thing that he had built for himself in honor of his achievements. The Arahant sees through that. Is not identified with it, though. Are we identified with our concepts? Do we have identifications? What are they? It's a good thing to sit down and maybe even write it out so you know what you're dealing with. You're not fighting, shadow boxing in the dark with yourself. It's good to know what your enemies are, who your enemies are, what our frailties are, what we're working against. And why is this the case? It is because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, and therefore he directly comprehends. This I declare. So what we're doing is basically releasing ourselves from relying on the concepts or perceptions of form, perceptions of, perceptions themselves, because the five aggregates, we're dealing with those, right? The five aggregates, pancha upadana khanda, the five grabbing aggregates, the things that we grab. Remember, a form is rupa, vedana is the other one, feelings. I mentioned earlier, the three types of feeling, which primacy is given to the enjoyable feeling, right? Or we run away from the bad one, the painful one. Perception is the other. Memories fall into that. Ideas, concepts. Then we have the sankharas, which are the deadly enemies lying in wait. These are the so-called friends of ours that make us feel very acclimated, very comfortable with what I'm about to say, what I need to do, because it comes naturally. We even translate them as being our innate, instinctual things, inherently part of us. No, they're not. They just came after habitually acclimating ourselves to them, doing them quite often. Whether it's thoughts, mind sankharas, mental sankharas, feelings, perceptions, or words, speech related, subvocal, before they become vocal, as well as physical. If you see something, if you are exposed to something, what is that tendency that you feel the urge to? You see something, suddenly there's the urge to say something. So when there is no sati, you won't ask the question. You would just blurt out and say it. Similarly with action. Something happens, you turn around and you do this. I would describe this to individuals who would come asking about, what is there an antidote when I see something very attractive, a seductive person passing by? Am I a bad person when I'm looking at them? I don't have any intentions of following through with that thought, but I just feel sometimes looking at them. I mean, come on, they're very, very attractive. I say, okay. Can you break down what has happened? If you didn't know that person was there or was going to be passing your line of sight, would you have become all this perplexed over? They would say, no, of course not. So sati, if you develop it well enough, if you have full awareness, will break those frames of film, if you will, into pieces as they are. Instead of automatically, the muscles remember this because, yes, over evolution, you would say, we've developed the tendencies to behave a certain way. You see an attractive thing, immediately you look. Okay, if you're practicing restraint slowly, well, you slow it down. Because now you're able to catch yourself before it goes into unskillful territory where you start fantasizing, imagining about what could be the possibilities of me and that person over there. Oh, I've never seen someone so attractive before. Wow, or I've never smelled such an attractive pheromone-filled fragrance before. Who has that on? Who's wearing that? The sankharas are the ones that are guiding you. Basically, you are on autopilot. Autopilot doesn't exist. It's sankhara pilot does in Buddhism. Okay, think of it like that. Because we are on automatic pilot called sankharas, whether through body, speech, or mind. The Arahant has been able to see that, so the sankharas don't even happen. Then they don't jolt him, they don't shake him or her. But the problem is we don't give time and space to this. We don't pause, we don't consider, we don't take a moment to look at anicca, dukkha, anatta taking place in front of our eyes. And these become dangerous because we're not paying attention to. It's like you see a sign that says dangerous, don't cross, but you do. We just need to understand them, and that's what the Arahant is doing here. The same thing with the air or wind quality, vayu. Similarly, while looking at water and all that has the moving or pressuring quality of the air or wind element, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends air as air. He sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagine air to be air through and nothing else. He does not imagine himself existing in nor in relation to air. So he's no longer living in the extremes. Nor is he pulled into any version of or aspect of airiness of air. He does not imagine air as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider it as mine. For he neither delights in nor because of air. And why is this the case? It's because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, therefore directly comprehend. So he is able to notice the feelings, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or painful, or neutral, as they arise and cease. As they arise and cease. This is key. Because what we tend to do, we like to keep a seamless continuity about life. We get up, we go to work, we get up and do our routines, we get up and in the mornings, and then we come back. And so there's this seamless looking, quote unquote, continuity. Why do I say this? Because that is our antidote to anicca. That's the way we can blindfold ourselves that anicca doesn't exist, even momentarily. We create this seamless continuity when none exists. And that's identification with oneself. That's identification with you, the person over there. That is our way of fighting the disenchantment that should take place in the face of seeing anicca for what it is, impermanence. But what one might ask, oh, Bhante, how about suffering? What do we do any antidotes? Do we close our eyes to seeing dukkha? Yeah, of course. If we're blindsiding ourselves, if we're blindfolding our eyes by refusing to see impermanence, of course we're also doing the same when it comes to dukkha, experiencing suffering, where we're denying the facts. And the simple way that meditators are told about that is, well, when you sit to meditate, what do you do after you find a certain sensation show up? Like pain. What do you do? Or an itch. What do you do? By the way, that is called also sankhara. The body wants to move. You want to scratch. You want to move your toes. You want, oh yeah, but there's this big bug walking over my head. Meanwhile, it's a tiny little strand of hair, maybe the wind blown, and it's just touching just gently your forehead. No, it feels like hell. I have to move that, Bhante. How? Well, I need to move my arm, I need to move my wrists, my elbow, my fingers, my everything, and then, oh, there's no bug. Oh, I felt like it was a concrete block of something. No, I'm exaggerating here, but they feel just as bad, right? Or when you really feel, you need to change your position. You need to change the way you're sitting. What are you doing? You are trying to remove yourself from dukkha. Earlier, we were trying to create this seamless continuity in order for us not to see impermanence. Now what we're doing is we're displacing ourselves, moving aside from dukkha. I don't want to, and see now, oh yeah, now I'm walking. Oh yes, that's good. And then what happens? 3-4 minutes into it, it feels like it's been an hour that you're walking meditation. It's only been 3-4 minutes. So the same thing happens with the what I mentioned about the taking the compact, making it real in our heads, the non-substantial, seeing it as something substantial or as permanent, instead of seeing the dynamism of the whole thing, the being in flux, a state of flux. We don't see it. And that is basically our antidote, our way of disregarding anatta. See the 3 characteristics of existence? That allows us to see the onion as something solid, not layers. The thing that is really, really not that pretty or definitely ugly, we like to see it as beautiful. The most beautiful thing. It could be a fruit, it could be an object, it could be a person. Well, let that person stay there. Lock them up in a room where they don't get to shower. You get the point? It becomes disgusting to even be in their vicinity because they smell. So all these 3, anicca, dukkha, anatta, when we camouflage them with our delusion, we maintain the sense of identification, which continues on perpetuating the sense of ongoing state of agitation and this palpitation, shaking constantly, being fickle, constantly at the mercy of situations, the weather, the political scene, the world, all the dynamism that's going on, the dynamic reality, which always keeps us on the edge of, I have to, just this much, well, constant proliferation, which in order for it to keep running, it requires the fuel of conceit. So the Arahant is a person who has pulled conceit right out of its roots. Remember I was saying about this is such a, as you notice, unlike the other 2 sections, because I've already covered them extensively, these sections, right? The 24, twice over. Today I'm focusing more on the deciphering or the unraveling of, well, at least what does the Arahant have in his attitude? How does he or she relate with all these 24? And that's what I feel the time has to be spent mostly doing. And that's what I'm doing here, by the way. So conceit, which we have seen before, craving, conceit, and views are at the bottom of these things, these tendencies. You can't just say ignorance and walk away. It's not some noun like that. Yes, I've used willful ignoring because that adds more of an active participation in our own ignorance, which perpetuates suffering, our own suffering. But what is the mechanism? And that's what the Buddha is trying to say. Arahantship is not this mystical state. It's psychological freedom. Nibbāna is psychological freedom. It's released from suffering. Psychological because, as opposed to physical freedom, right? Physical suffering. No one said the Arahant is never going to experience physical suffering. It has happened, but it's not like the thing, What is key is the absence of craving, conceit, and views. These are at the basis of perpetuation of suffering, psychological suffering, emotional suffering, because they demand involvement. The Arahant is not involved. Remember I mentioned Nibbāna earlier, disenchantment. This is such a rich sutta. If you notice, I'm going all over the place because I'm trying to touch on so many key concepts, which inevitably we see throughout the other suttas to follow after this first of the Majjhima Nikaya middle length discourses. So they're all here. So when we talk about Nibbāna, as I was saying earlier, you cannot cancel out Nibbāna or viraga, disenchantment and dispassion fading away, out of the path, and still somehow hope that you will attain Nibbāna. It doesn't work. So the person has to experience revulsion towards craving. It comes apart because you're looking at the thing you were craving, and because you're observant, you were looking with the clear eye that honesty sees anicca present. When you're looking with that clear gaze, you clearly understand, directly know for yourself, comprehending fully the fact that you're now completely turned off by that, completely repulsed by the fact that, well, this is so unreliable. What was my making a big deal about? This is so unreliable. The fruit I was so craving to eat, I left it outside for a day, and now there's like, there's stuff crawling in it. There's worms coming out. Or this probably has happened to all of us, right? Not just one time, but I would see somebody would give me, or I would pick up a peach or an apple, and I wouldn't see the tiny hole in it somewhere, and I would cut it open, and I bite into it, right? That happens. What happens at the moment that, if you're lucky and you don't completely swallow that piece or chew it, and you pull your hand away, and all of a sudden you see a worm or something that has been living there, calling it its home, the apple or the peach or the fruit. What happened there? You're disgusted by it. You pull out the piece from your mouth and see if you've bitten into that. You're not going to touch that again. It goes into the trash. But unfortunately, what do? We reach for another apple. No, that one's going to be different. So, to be able to see craving, conceit, and views is at the bottom. Why? Because bottom of understanding, that is. Because repulsion or revulsion, being repulsed by the thing, Nibbāna, drives you. If you have enough of those incidents happen, events take place where again and again you see how it's all transitory, there's really nothing to be holding on to. What that does is like a teenager who realizes there's no Santa Claus. Or the movie that you were watching in the theater, all of a sudden the lights come on, or you see the credits and everybody gets up and they start talking about it to perpetuate the theme that this was a real thing. Meanwhile, it's all over. The passion is gone. You realize, your brain realizes to its own dismay and disgust, although momentary, that it's all gone. So the Arahant is somebody who had been doing that enough times where it builds up to the point where it becomes dispassion, where it is not given the opportunity to overwhelm his or her mind anymore. This is called equanimity of looking at the sankharas. To be not moved into the story, into not being agitated. Instead, you're looking at the sankharas and seeing them for what they are. Just like that example I gave you of a person who's looking or they see something beautiful or someone very seductive or provocative, or it could be a person, it could be a thing, beautiful sunrise. But before they turn to look, automatically, at the mercy of the sankharas, they are equanimous. This is that last step that has to happen before the Arahant becomes an Arahant. So revulsion leads to dispassion, and dispassion, viraga, the fading away of passions. The next stage of that, or the refined stage of that, is when equanimity starts drenching all of it. So the person is now seeing the sankhara, but is not pulled into them, is not buying into them. He is seeing and just seeing. In hearing, they're just hearing. They might even look at the mind looking at itself, saying, oh, look at that sankhara, trying to have me turn around and look at that pretty person. And then they might decide to turn, or they might not. But if they do, it will be in the presence of strong equanimity over the sankharas. Because the disenchantment has been so powerful and is so present. This is non-involvement at best. And they're no longer caught in views or opinions or craving as such. There's no conceit, because they realize, oh, it's just, wow, it's a precarious thing. Even to maintain the idea of a self, I being different than you, it's a hassle. So the earlier I was saying about the discrimination of the consciousness, this consciousness that discriminates between good feeling, pleasant feeling, and painful feeling, even that you start seeing. And on seeing, there's the cessation of that discriminatory consciousness, of blindly following the function of this discrimination. Oh, I have to look for the pleasant and pick the pleasant out of the unpleasant. I have to always be like this, like a chicken looks all over the place for food. You no longer are doing that. Why? Because there's no longer manana, the key verb, the culprit of that is always highlighted in the sutta. Next, we get to the bhuta, which are while living, looking at living beings and all the diverse qualities about them. The Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends living beings as living beings. This because he sees and understands them through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagine living beings to be living other than living beings through and through, and nothing else. He does not imagine himself existing among nor in relation to living beings. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from living beings. He does not imagine living beings as things to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider them as mine, for he neither delights in nor because of living beings. And why is this the case? It is because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, and therefore he directly comprehends. This I declare. Next, we get to the Devas, same thing. He sees and understands them through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines Devas to be Devas. He just sees them as that. He doesn't proliferate any concepts. He doesn't embellish them. That's why a true Buddhist does not have much to do with Devas ultimately, because a true practitioner in the sasana has respect for all beings, Devas and humans alike. So you start treating the Devas as you would treat your family members. Hopefully you treat your family members well, but you treat them the same way, and the Devas really appreciate that. You don't put that wall between you and them. It makes them comfortable about you. It's like some celebrities that I've over the years heard people talk about, or even they where they want to just be treated like regular normal people. They sometimes complain that they can't go anywhere without paparazzis, this and that. They're no longer are normal people, and they want to feel that. The Devas are on a much higher level than that, of course, but they also want to feel appreciated, but treat it as you would treat somebody you care about, not to worship them ultimately. And that's what the Buddha's own life demonstrates. He never worshipped the Devas. On the opposite side, well, on the contrary, the Devas would come and worship him and the Arahants. And anyone who practices Sila Samadhi Panya, by the way, the Devas love to have their hands in Anjali, to bow to someone who is practicing the three trainings wholeheartedly, practicing dana, generosity, wholeheartedly. They are moved. And similarly, he doesn't look upon the Devas as something to be possessed. So he doesn't look upon them as mine, like some people claim, oh, this God is mine, he's our God, my God. Well, that is nonsense. It's so infantile, it's so juvenile, it's so stupid. It's so like ECE quality, early childhood education, it's below kindergarten level. It's quite foolish that in the 21st century, we still have multitudes, billions of people who believe that kind of stuff. So the Arahant definitely is not one of those. The progenitor, the Pachapati, or predecessor to all beings, he looks upon him the same way. Again, as you notice, I'm going through because it's the same refrain in a sense. Brahma God, he sees and understands him through his higher knowledge and does not objectify nor imagine him to be other than that. And now with the higher Devas, Devas of streaming radiance, Abhasara Devas, same thing. Subhakinha Deva, the same thing, the lustrous, beautiful Devas. Devas of limitless fruit, Vehapala Devas. By the way, we see them in the suttas a lot, these Devas. And especially in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses, we see them a lot mentioned. Overlord or Mahabrahma Abhibhuta, while looking at the Overlord and all his divine qualities, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends the Overlord as the Overlord, seeing and understanding him through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not objectify nor imagines him to be otherwise. Next, we get to the formless realms, dimensions, sphere or dimension of infinity of space. While looking at that sphere or dimension and its qualities, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends the sphere of infinity of space as the sphere of infinity of space. Nothing more, nothing less. He does not imagine the sphere of infinity of space as something to be possessed. So there's no holding on to that jhānic attainment. He doesn't go around telling people, I attained this, I attained that, or I have attained this. They keep it private, unless they're using it as a teaching tool, not to show off. There's no craving, there's no conceit there, definitely no views. So it's very matter of fact. And they're saying it, they're sharing it to simply highlight something to help the person understand, the listener, to break maybe, hopefully, their own conceit, if they have the ears to hear, that is. The sphere of infinity of consciousness, the same thing. This is the one next, higher up in the formless jhānic state. And then the one after that is the sphere of nothingness and its qualities. The Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends the sphere of dimension of nothingness as the sphere of nothingness. He sees and understands it through his higher knowledge and therefore does not objectify nor imagine the sphere of nothingness to be just that sphere of nothingness through and through and nothing else. He does not imagine himself existing in relation to the sphere of nothingness. So there is no identification. All those are the Buddha's way of making sure that there's no misconception of what he's trying to say. Manana is equal to imagining, is equal to identification, creating a buffer between myself and you. There's the other now versus me here. There's none. in the case of the Arahant. That is the stumbling block that we have to break that pattern. Same thing with the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. And he says he doesn't take it as mine, he neither delights in nor because of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. Why is this the case? It is because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, and therefore he directly comprehends. This I declare. So revulsion or disenchantment has to be developed. As I mentioned, it is a requirement for Nibbāna. That, because otherwise you would think, oh, I have to get rid of identification. Okay, that's good. But you need to have a step-by-step process that is intertwined with your living experience. Otherwise, identification on its own, for many people, it's too abstract. What does that mean? Now, when we talk about seeing anicca, dukkha, anatta, especially anicca and dukkha, for most, is more accessible. So when you're doing that, when you're observing through seeing how everything is precariously held together by just this fickle glue called attachment, called perpetuation of a self-image, to create this false sense of seamless continuity, to maintain this story, to maintain this movie. And every time there is painful experience, you get up and move, you change the scenery so you don't feel dukkha. As you start to see those patterns of your behavior, remember the title of the sutta? Root behavior of all, the root pattern of all behavior of all mind objects. That's what, it's your mind objects, by the way, yeah? That you're identifying, you're seeing, you're discovering. And therefore, through that discovery, you really are experiencing understanding, comprehension, fully comprehending. This is what we call understanding. Because revulsion or Nibbāna, which is a crucial aspect, it's one of the stories of a building, one of the floors of a building. If you want to go from the floor number 4 to number 6 and everything else that comes above it, you need the one next to it, 5th floor. You cannot skip that floor. And similarly with dispassion that follows that. So when you have the disenchantment because of your observation of impermanence taking place in your life with the things that you liked, you see it again and again, you pay attention. That's what I meant by you have to give it time, you have to give it effort, you have to give from your own, you have to create a pause in your daily story manufacturing in your head. Thanks to the sankharas, thanks to the conceits, thanks to the craving, thanks to the views and opinions, pulling yourself away from that and seeing, is this a pattern? Am I seeing something that drives me away from this? Really? Yeah, it's precarious. It's badly maintained because any moment I let go, it's going to collapse. It's like a house of cards. And there's no glue in this case. The whole deck of cards that we put together, like made a castle, collapses. So now, looking at that allows you to see the sankharas. Seeing Nibbāna also means you're seeing the pattern underneath, the sankharas. What are the sankharas? The conditioned phenomena, the habitual drives. You're seeing them for what they are. It's sad, really. This is when you're coming to realize the repeatability of our stupidity. Oh, but it's a pattern. Yes, it is a pattern. You mean to say I don't have to follow it? Yeah. So if that pretty thing shows up or doesn't show up, it behooves upon me to turn or not turn. I can turn away. I can look at something else. Yeah. But that requires that moment, that gap in between requires that we become equanimous. we're no longer agitated. There's no longer any heat, no longer any passion. Nibbāna means there's no more heat, there's no more fire, there's no more agitation, there's no more suffering. But this all rests upon our own individual shoulders. So it is because of equanimity that we observe correctly and thus experience truthfully what we are encountering really in the world by seeing only what is seen. That's it. Hearing only what is being heard, not making it anything bigger. So then revulsion itself becomes the very severing of the thick cable called attachment. Attachment to patterns, attachment to likes and dislikes, the discriminating consciousness I was referring to. But this requires a refined level of equanimity, okay, which develops through practice. And that's why you're meditating, really. You're not practicing to get a little bit of a respite from your tough day, to get some relaxation, to get into a jhāna and stay there and then reminisce that state, and then for the next 10, 15 years of your life, yes, you know, I experienced tranquility or have a few insights and that's it. That's not the full extent of the Dhamma, to say the least. No, you're trying to set yourself free from becoming jolted, agitated perpetually. You have to break yourself free from that. And passion is at the core of it. That has to be cut. You have to cut yourself free from that. So next time you're experiencing something, bring in the 3 characteristics. Be honest about it. See impermanence for what it is. See dukkha for what it is. And let the natural process take over, because naturally you're going to develop Nibbāna, disenchantment. You're going to get turned off, as they say, or in the vernacular. You're going to be repulsed by. Again. Next, what is seen? We're around 17 now. Ditthi. Similarly, while looking at what is seen and all that has the quality of being visible or seen and observed by the eyes, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends what is seen as that which is seen, like I was mentioning earlier. So he doesn't see himself distinctly different than what the thing is that is being seen. He doesn't imagine himself within the thing that is being seen, nor does he see the thing and want to possess it. Carry it with him or her. What is heard. Similarly, while looking at what is heard and all that has the quality of being heard or listened to and observed by the ears, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends what is heard as that which is heard. Similarly, with, mutamattan bhavisati. There's simply sensing and nothing more. So that is what is sensed, muta. And then we get to known, vinyata, what is known or cognized. While looking at what is known or cognized and all that has the quality of being known and observed by the mind, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends what is known as that which is known. He does not imagine himself in the known. He does not see it as something to be possessed, nor considers the known as mine, meaning concepts, even insights. I know many people who experience insights, there's a tendency to want to grab the insights. We talk about it, we write books. I know some people who even sat down to write books from the insights that they claim were insights that they were experiencing during meditation retreats. Okay, the outcome of that, what's going on in the mind? Is the ego thinking still maintaining the driver's seat? Is the ego still running the joint? Steering the wheel of consciousness? In other words, is manana still in control? Are we lost in thinking? in conjuring, in mentally proliferating. You can think of it as egoistic imagining, manyana. Because ultimately, they're simply projections, as we talked about, right? Ultimately. Because these are all assumptions about things that are conditioned themselves. They're fickle. There's nothing. Like an asteroid, right? Most asteroids are actually pieces of rock or even rocks on this planet. Igneous rocks and things. They are, over time, pieces of rock come together, coagulate together. But when you break it, cut it open, you see that it's made up of different rocks for some reason. Same thing with cells. Everything conditioned is manyana. We have turned it into a thing. A thingness, giving that title, that label of thingness, makes us kind of relax and sit back a little bit and not to worry, as if, because we have pulled the plug on anicca dukkha anatta. You are spitting in the face of anicca dukkha anatta when you call something a thing, when you identify it as a thing. You are maintaining ignorance. You are maintaining conceit. Remember, the Arahant does not have conceit, because they look at reality and don't see a thing. Really. It's all made up. But nevertheless, they're not delusional. They're not living in, they're not like some people who take drugs constantly and they want to live in that state. No, they see things for what they are. They know it in detail, but they're not sucked into the details. They're not looking for specifics and being pulled in, entering into the features of an experience, be it a visible form, a sound. Oh, listen to that sound. It's so beautiful. The opera singer. Yeah, wow, yeah, that flavor. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, this silk feels. Oh, yeah. Or that beautiful idea. Oh, wow. No. When Michelangelo Buonarroti, one of the founders of the Italian Renaissance, when he was carving the marble, which ended up being the biblical figure of Moses, when he carved it, if you go and see it, there's a crack on the knee. I've been there a few times. It's a powerful, powerful presence of, yes, creativity, this, that. But what happened with him was people, I don't know if it's true or not. I think that it's just a legend. People add it or attach to it. But apparently, after he's done it, he completed it, he looks over at this figure that he carved, Michelangelo, and takes one of his hammers and slams it against the knee. And he says, "Speak, speak," because it was so real. To this day, you go and see it, it was like, oh, that's being sucked into the features of this thing that is marble. It's made of particles, rock. Talk about identification, right? The notion of a concept that has turned into a thing. It became something other than what it was. And then we attach value to it. But you can look at every single, actually, relationship you've ever had, the people and circumstances we've had. Don't you see the features there? Good or bad? Personally known and tasted features and signs of good and bad. The Buddha calls the Arahant the Sappurisa, by the way. Sappurisa is the real, genuine, superior being. Sometimes some people call it Superman or Superwoman. Sappurisa. Well, that makes the person superior. The ability not to become any longer identified, being pulled in abhinivesaya. Sabbe dhamma nalang abhinivesaya. That was the Buddha's message to Sakka, which he had, oddly enough, had given to Mahamoggallana the night of his awakening, when he was still struggling. Venerable Mahamoggallana, that same message, that's why it triggered Venerable Mahamoggallana to go ahead and check whether Sakka also became an Arahant, because he did when he heard it being spoken to him. Nothing is worth to be sucked into, entered into. It's like a house, or the foyer, the entryway of a house that you walk in, you're inside the house now. I'm sorry, you're no longer on the street. You're inside. Looking at the details of features of a thing being observed, experienced, being pulled into the story is exactly that. But the Arahant is doing the opposite. Abhinivesaya. Nothing is fit to be clung to. 21, unity or oneness, same thing. While looking at and seeing unity in all things, and all that has the quality of oneness, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends unity or oneness as unity or oneness. Multiplicity, while looking at and seeing the multiplicity of things, same thing. He fully knows and indirectly comprehends multiplicity or diversity as diversity. And Sabbha, the same thing. While looking at and seeing the all or everything that is witnessed, he comprehends it as all and nothing else. Doesn't see it himself as being in it, of it, possessed by it, being mine, nor does he delight, nor because of the sense of the all. Finally, Nibbāna. Similarly, on having already tasted and known Nibbāna directly, the Arahant fully knows and directly comprehends it as Nibbāna itself. This because he sees and understands it through his higher knowledge, and therefore does not perceive nor objectify Nibbāna. Nor imagines it as something separate, a separate thing called Nibbāna that is out there. He does not imagine himself existing in relation to Nibbāna. Nibbāna is my thing over here. He does not imagine himself being distinctly different nor apart from Nibbāna. He does not imagine Nibbāna as something to be possessed, and therefore he does not consider Nibbāna as mine, nor something to go ahead and prove to people, by the way. And thus he does not identify with it, nor becomes absorbed into some kind of intoxication for or because of Nibbāna. And why is this the case? It is because the Arahant has come to fully know and understand, and therefore he directly comprehends. This I declare. Because of grasping, which exists thanks to the presence of craving, conceit, and views, opinions, there is identification. Earlier, I was mentioning about the Panchupadana Kanda, the grabbing on to the five aggregates, as I mentioned, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vijnana, right? Form, feelings, concepts, perceptions, memories, habitual drives, Sankharas, what often people translate as volitional formations, which I'm not a fan of. Vijnana, consciousness, 6 types of consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. There's grasping. We use these 6 doors to grasp onto things. As if that's not enough, we grab onto, because you cannot just be grabbing onto one aspect of the aggregates and leaving the rest as false. No, we grab onto the whole thing. That's why it's called Panchupadana Kanda. The 5 grabbings. The 5 grabbing onto the 5. Because in order for us to complete the ruse, to complete the scam, to complete the conspiracy against us, we have to constantly tell ourselves lies of identifications. But the Arahant isn't like that. He's or she's done with that. There's a term, atammayata, that the Buddha uses. in the suttas. And that is a term in English loosely we can translate it as non-identification, something that I've been repeating throughout the sutta. That is the, if you want to call the Arahant, the personification of that state, atammayata, because nothing sticks. Nothing sticks. He might smell a rose, he might smell an orchid, he might smell a jasmine, and that's it. That's the end of it. He smelled it. Does he have senses? Yes. Olfactory senses work. He doesn't turn his back on it, but he doesn't perpetuate it. He doesn't conceptualize it. He doesn't engage in manyana. So for that reason, the Arahant is called also atammayo, the one who does not identify anymore. So what is taking place for the Arahant, as we know from the suttas, is the psychological shift. The Seka is known as the person who, even from the state of Sotapatti, stream winning, they are called, in some commentarial traditions, they are called at that point changing of lineage. They no longer are Putujjanas. Okay? They make the turn, they go past the point of no return. But here, with the Arahant, there's a huge psychological shift. So, and it's a state that you can only attain once, as in entering into, in this case, the state of liberation, and then fall out and then come back in. That doesn't happen. That's what I mean by you can attain it once. Once you've attained it, you've attained it. You don't go back into becoming deluded again. It's impossible. Just like a Sotapanna can never fall out. They can be very lazy, but in the case of an Arahant, it's a different altogether shift. It's a no way return, because the person has now crossed the flood. And they have done it through dedication and effort. Every step of the way, nothing was given, ultimately. Even Bahya, where people say, oh, he was ready, he was really primed, he had very good merits. Yes, but those merits even did not come from somewhere else. He had to work on them. That's why he was ready. That's why he was the quickest to attain with the shortest instruction on Dhamma. The quickest with the shortest instruction on Dhamma. So there is genuine wisdom that is experienced through the practice, but that's what makes it genuine. It's not someone else's wisdom anymore. It's yours. But it's an effort-filled work until you get to the other shore, which is not a physical place. This has to be said because many people have taken Nibbāna as a place where you go and attain, and where the Buddha is waiting to put the, hula, the lei flowers around your neck, like you go to Hawaii, and that maybe there's no such thing, There's no such place. The Arahants are not waiting, cheering you on over there, saying, yeah, come on, you can do this. Last few miles, you just have to, no, it's not a physical place. The energy of the Arahants and the Buddhas are there, always, of course, if one is sensitive to them and if one is truly working. That is doubtless. But to look at Nibbāna as a physical place, that is a delusion, where magical things would be happening. No. The work has to be done before Arahantship. How's that? The work that we do is the thing itself that will get us to Arahantship, not something to be given to us once we enter upon the golden gates of, I don't know, heavenly, divine Nibbāna land, no such place exists. Freedom is here, the Buddha repeated, to be experienced by you, for you, in this very life, by your own means, through your own efforts, that is. Diteva dhamme, in this very birth of yours, in this very life of yours, that is where Nibbāna is supposed to happen. And that is what an Arahant is. So this was the first section of the four categories or distinctions of the Arahant. I'm not going to cover the other three because, as I mentioned in the beginning extensively, the Arahant, the second distinction that the Buddha is making is for the Arahant who has destroyed passion, the Arahant who's destroyed hatred, and the Arahant who's destroyed delusion. These make up, in addition to this one that we covered today. So I will pause. I will pause here, and yeah. So I'm glad that we were able to complete this week's dedicated to the Arahant. And once this is all done and proofread, we will upload this as well. But next week will be the fourth category of individuals discussed in the Mūlapariyāya, and that would be the Tathagata. And there we will see primarily, basically, two categories of Tathagatas, which we can generally state as the Samma Sambuddho, the Buddha that teaches, and the Buddha that is known as Pacceka Buddha, the silent Buddha, who doesn't teach. Nevertheless, he's also Samma Sambuddha. Okay, so I'll stop here and close it with a three sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. But nevertheless, I would like you to share any thoughts, comments you might have. Something might have said, I might have said where might have brought up some question or comment. Okay, if there are none, let us close today's session with the transferring of merits. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. These suttas are powerful, especially these big ones. They are highly respected by beings, human and non-human. More so by non-humans, by Devas, by Nagas, who are very advanced in their practice, in their understanding of the Dhamma, who appreciate, by Brahma gods. So they rejoice whenever we are quietly reading the suttas, when we are, not just this sutta or similarly deep and complex suttas, but I consider all suttas to be deep, really. Of course, some more than others, but whenever you're practicing, whenever you're even mentioning or recounting to yourself or playing an audio, listening to it, reading it, or contemplating a section or a verse from a sutta, Do not be surprised nor alarmed when you sense other beings around you who are truly joyful that you are recalling and bringing to mind words of the Buddha. Because the demise of the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, is impossible to stop. The deterioration and the eventual disappearance of the Dhamma is inevitable. It will happen, and it is happening, of course. But every time you recall, every time you practice, every time you take a snippet from talks like this or from the sutta itself especially, and work on it, and in your daily life try to see anicca, dukkha, anatta, it's really extending the life of the sasana. Now that is what extends the life of the sasana, not the rites and rituals. They don't. At best, they might make you feel cozy inside because you see other people wearing the same thing or chanting something that you do. But really, it doesn't mean much other than that. Your practice does. Even a moment of sati-filled awareness of the breath, or mentioning buddho, buddho, or dhammo, dhammo, or sangho, sangho to yourself, or a quality of the Buddha or the Dhamma, that itself can really freeze everything. And when I say freeze everything, you might have a Brahma God that will leave everything and be right next to you immediately. Faster than you could drop a lead ball to the ground. They would be next to you before it hits the ground. Similarly with the gods, with the Devas, with Nagas that are very powerful, with certain Dhamma-filled Yakhas, whose hearts that we've met already in some of the suttas, Satagiri, etc. So be inspired and inspire yourself, because as you're doing that, you are inspiring others with your practice. So you're never alone. If there is genuine zeal and ardency in you towards the Dhamma, and you will attain. Just maintain this course. You will attain. Every one of you will attain. Just a matter of time. If you maintain the course, don't let go of what the Dhamma has done for you and continues to do for you. And have faith in yourself. Above all, in yourself. That I too can really experience what an Arahant has experienced. I too can experience release, vimutti, akuppaceto vimutti, the unshakable awakening state of the heart's release. It's unshakable. So with that, I hope to see you next week. Continue to practice and try to bring the Dhamma with you everywhere you go, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you close them at the end of the day. May you live happily, protected, in prosperity, with good health, along with your families. May your relationships be wonderful. May all your loved ones cherish you and you cherish them. And may the Dhamma come alive in everything you do, where it no longer is words that you keep telling yourself, but it is your behavior that has transformed itself, thanks to your efforts. Sukhi Hot.